John's got a great story. It's a story of that he shared with me on a trip to India, just of his life. And what's special about John is his just commitment to be an authentic person who allows himself to live his story and share his story of brokenness and also the other side of that, redemption through many aspects of his life. And again, he's the owner of TGB Architect and has done many churches and medical clinics around Washington State and the Northwest region. So would you welcome my friend John Taylor?
That was a good job there, Robin. Really had to prepare for that one. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, that's nice and strong. Thank you. I'm an insecure person, so I need that. I am married, have 37 years, guys, and it just keeps getting better and better. I can say that with all honesty and integrity. I have 4 wonderful daughters and 2 wonderful sons-in-laws, and for the first time, I'm going to be a grandpa come this fall. Taylor Gregory Broadway Architects, we have a mission statement. The mission statement is providing atmosphere and facilities for health and healing, body, soul, and spirit. Providing atmosphere. I actually believe that this room creates an atmosphere for us. And facilities for health and healing, body, soul, and spirit. So that gives me the opportunity to say yes to a very few things. And it gives me the opportunity to say no to many things. And what I say yes to is providing atmosphere that produces that environment that's comfortable and is healing and allows us to come into that process of a presence of ourselves and our God. So we only do medical facilities and church facilities and nonprofit work. So for the last 25 years, when I created our business, I set out to engage in just those few things. Today, our topic is navigating adversity in life and business, and it's sponsored by the Navigators and the Entrepreneur School or International School of Leadership. And so I thought, I am an entrepreneur, but I really don't know what the definition of an entrepreneur is. So I looked it up in a couple of different sources, and I cobbled together from a couple of different places, including Wikipedia, what is an entrepreneur? And so here's what I came up with. It's someone who organizes, operates, manages, and networks required resources and considerable initiative and capitalized risk for a business or other venture. My favorite game of all time. I love this game. In fact, what I think it would really be fun is if we had 4 hours someday at Marketplace, we all ought to play Risk at the table. What's that? Just start early. I cannot beat my son-in-law. For the last 7 years, I have a son-in-law whose favorite game is Risk. It's my favorite game. And he's got a strategy, and I can't beat him. But someone who organizes and operates, manages networks, required resources, considerable initiative, and risk. I have a problem in life. I'm an entrepreneur. And it is something that is inside of me. I can see the future. I can taste it. It's become me. And so I often say to people, my vision is my future. I can actually see somehow or another what's going to take place in my life. Now, I don't know if you remember last time, but we went around the table and we each shared about the gift that we felt that we have inside of us. And as we went around the table and as everybody got up and shared last month, it dawned on me that most of the people in this room, at least last month, if not half of them, have an entrepreneur spirit. Are you guys familiar with the Strength Finders test? How many of you are familiar with this? Okay, over half of you. Strength Finders, and this is a survey that helps tell you some of your gifts. Well, I went through this book in preparing for today, and I thought, how many of these strengths in this Gallup poll would be strengths that would be found in an entrepreneur? Activator, achiever, commander, competitive, developer, focused, futuristic, maximizer, significant, and strategic. Okay, my top one is futuristic. Futuristic is somebody who basically is always saying, wouldn't it be great if? Wouldn't it be great? And not only that, everybody else should think that it's great. All right? And so that's who I am. I can't get rid of this futuristic thing that's inside of me. But I have a problem in being an entrepreneur too. And the problem is this: when the roadblocks are faced and when the stuff hits the fan. Do you know what stuff is that hits the fan? Starts also with an S. When that stuff hits the fan and when people get in the way and I'm no longer in control, that's my adversity, isn't it? Because I've got such a strong dreamer inside of me that it just has to ooze out of me. And it has to happen being a futuristic person. It's also interesting to me that for those of you who go to breakfasts like this, maybe C3 and other kinds of places, entrepreneurs love relationships. They genuinely are very sincere about relationships. Relationships are important to us as an entrepreneur or any of these other gifts identified in Strength Finders. We believe it so much, and we believe it's such a noble cause that we want everybody else to come along with us. Whether it's a great business adventure, whether or not it's a commitment to a church or our own family, we want others to come along with us, don't we? And that's really who I am. I can't get rid of who I am. Robert Reich, the U.S. economist who served under both the Carter and Clinton administrations, I believe is still alive, is quite well known, stated that team building, in other words, building relationships and networks and team, and leadership and management ability are essential ingredients for the entrepreneur. In other words, guys, wouldn't it be great if you came along with me and we could all get together to develop atmosphere for health and healing, body, soul, and spirit? Wouldn't that be great? Come and see me and I'll give you an application. I want to be a person that creates a great future. for my family, for my business, for my friends, for my community, for my church. When I was 7 years old, I often could be found before or after dinner, during school, and in my free time of taking a napkin and drawing on a napkin the next tree fort that I was going to build. And I was slated in a very staunch Catholic family. I was targeted to be the Catholic priest of our family at 7 years old. But I constantly had something inside of me that had to draw, lay out, see, and execute the next tree fort. So between age 7 and 17, I built 7 tree forts. And I wish I could show you a picture of the multi-story with shutters and ladders and shingles and living rooms and bedrooms in tree forts that I got all the rest of the guys in the neighborhood to help me build for a period of 10 years. I could see it and believe it and get other people involved, and I loved a vision accomplished. The problem, folks, that I want to suggest to you this morning is life is broken. And I'm broken. I'm a cracked pot. And it sometimes, usually, doesn't happen that way. Does it? Because adversity will come. It does come. And the stuff of life is going to interfere with the vision that I have to see and realize in my future. It doesn't turn out the way we think it is. And many times, being an entrepreneur, we will use our gifts to make up for the other weaknesses in our life. The other holes, I say, are in our soul. You see, early on in life, and I don't know if you're anything like me, but early on in life, I made some determinations. And I think I made some of these determinations because of some of the strong suits, but also some of the weak suits in my life. I made some determinations such as coming from a dysfunctional family. We all come from dysfunctional families, don't we? Coming from a dysfunctional family, I made a determination that I was going to have a better marriage than my parents' marriage. And that I was going to be a better father than my father was. And that I was going to have better kids than my siblings' kids. And that I was going to have the respect and the being looked up to that my father did not have, being an alcoholic. And I determined that I was going to become the very best person that I possibly could be, to be respected and to be looked up to. And I was one of those type of kids that I wasn't good at athletics and I wasn't good at academics. In fact, I barely made it through school. Going through architecture school, Tom, you don't probably know this, but I failed so many classes that I had to continually go to summer school to make up for the classes that I was failing the first year. And how I ever made it through architecture school was just the grace of God. But I determined that I was going to do these things, and I certainly learned how to win and influence people. I certainly learned how to use relationships. And I certainly learned later on to use my church and the good guy image to fill the hole in my soul. So 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, during the course of an exploding and growing business, I experienced a series of very unfortunate events. And during that particular time of growing the business, I was traveling to 14 states at the time. I don't know, Tom, if you knew this, but at that particular time, especially back in 2007, 2008, 2009, we were doing churches, designing churches all over the Midwest. I was traveling all over in multiple states. Some of those churches were quite large in the Midwest. I compromised my mission statement. My mission statement in my business, providing atmospheres for healing and health, body, soul, and spirit, including facilities. I compromised that mission statement and brought on a partner who had a construction company. We formed a commercial construction company. Cliff, I don't know if you know, it was called Hammerworks Construction. And we went out and proceeded to develop and build mixed-use projects with retail and condominiums on the top level. And we designed and built these buildings throughout north end of Seattle, Kirkland, and downtown Edmonds. And during the midst of that, I was super involved in my church. I was on 4 nonprofit boards, one of which I created and one of which I helped found. I was an elder at my church. I was teaching Sunday school. I was overseeing small groups. And I was making 3 to 4 trips to Ukraine every year because a Microsoft donor had given us $1 million to build a ministry training and relief center in the country of Ukraine. And I was in charge of our ministry there and our board there. We had 14 employees there at the time, and I was managing this from here in Seattle. That, in terms of what's in my gut and my vision for the good stuff that had to get outside of me, all of this became me. It became me. Entrepreneurs, if you're one of these strengths, it oozes out of you. It's your DNA. And during this period of time, for about 12 months, a series of events started with Jean, my wife's father, dying. Within that same time period, my mother passed away. The same day my mother passed away, we had a mother with 2 daughters living with us after going through a painful divorce. Good friend of ours passed away the same day my mother passed away. While Jean was holding her hand and she died, I was holding my mother's hand the same hour, and they both passed away at the same time. The most difficult thing that happened within the same 2 months was a 17-year-old daughter, a senior in high school, who had a very, very traumatic event in her life that went sideways. She crashed and burned. And the behavior that she started to exhibit was very painful. After several arrests, after stealing our car and trying to leave town, after getting kicked out of school several times and being reinstated back in through counseling, and our not realizing the traumatic event that really happened to her, that was one of the most painful situations, because in January of that year, she came to us and she said, "I'm leaving and you will never see me again. Your God is not my God, your family's not my family, and I'm history." And she had gone downtown Seattle and she had gotten a black sheep tattooed on her chest. And she showed us her tattoo and said, "I am the black sheep, and you will never see me again." She moved to Oregon. She took up with a man. They sold drugs to stockpile ammunition. They lived in the mountains of eastern Oregon and Idaho, poaching deer and elk to prepare for the end of the world. We got counsel from many different folks of how to kidnap her and get this out of this controlling situation. We didn't feel that was the right thing to do. Oftentimes, we didn't even know where she was or how to get in contact with her. When she left town, my wife was teaching at the same school that she attended. We already were having problems with the school leadership because of Jana's behavior at the school and what was taking place in her life. And unfortunately, after 20 years of teaching in a private school, some parents came came to the administration and accused Jean of not being able to manage her classroom. And Jean was teaching a very difficult fifth grade class. Do you know what fifth graders are like? She was teaching a very difficult fifth grade class, and she was normally had taught kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And so teaching fifth grade, a difficult class, the situation with our daughter just having to leave this school and the turmoil that had taken place there, the administration of the school suggested to Jean that she should resign. And that if she didn't resign, there would be other consequences. And so in February of that year, mid-school year, after 20 years of teaching in a private school, Jean resigned her position. After losing my mother and her father and one of her best friends, and probably most significantly our daughter, she gave up her gift, her inside that oozes out of her, and went through a real grieving process in more ways than one. At the same time, in terms of compromising my vision statement and in partnering with a new partner and forming a construction company now to build condominiums all over the north end of Seattle, we had just hired 17 wonderful young men to build 505 Fifth Avenue South, downtown Edmonds, as a $20 million building. It was 90% complete. And I get a call from my partner at 4 a.m. in the morning who says, "John, 505 Fifth Avenue South is fully ablaze and burning to the ground." I drove down the hill into downtown Edmonds. It was one of those incredible, super foggy nights. And the total 180-degree view was aglow in orange and red. And there were fire trucks coming into downtown Edmonds from Seattle and Kirkland and Everett, because the embers from the insulation were going up into the sky, and there was very little wind, and these glowing, aflamed embers from the insulation were landing on top of buildings all downtown Edmonds. And the fire trucks, dozens and dozens of fire trucks, were going all throughout downtown Edmonds, making sure there were no other fires being developed. We sat in Potos's parking lot and we watched that building over the course of 5 hours totally burned down to the ground. The ATF showed up the very next morning from all over the country. Those guys had been in New York City at 9/11. They had been at that place down in Texas, Waco, Texas. Some of those guys had been down there. And they interviewed, within 1 week, the ATF interviewed every single one of our employees, both architecturally and construction-wise. And they found a subcontractor with one of our subs who had been arrested for arson once before. They interviewed every single tenant in every single building in surrounding condominiums because there was so much opposition of the building of 505 because of its blocking of views. And everybody was convinced that this was an arson, a spite arson of some sort to burn this building down. In the middle of this, I had to lay off 17 of those guys and say, we don't have any more work, but the insurance money is coming, only to find out the developer had underinsured the building and the bank allowed it. We were not able to pay our construction workers. We were not able to pay the subcontractors. The legal counsel advised the subs to turn around and sue us for payment. We tried our best to expend all of our assets to cover our workers and subcontractors. But guys, on an $11 million building that's been uninsured, there wasn't enough money. Plus, we were already starting to expend hundreds of thousands of dollars in defense fees because they had to sue us now so that we would turn around and sue the developer to get the monies to get everybody paid. What I didn't realize is the game that you play, I guess, is the developer countersued us for construction defects on a building that's been burnt down to the ground. We tried to get that thrown out of court as a frivolous lawsuit. We lost that in court, and we lost the countersuit. Out of 27 counts of construction defects, what was found was an error in one of our invoices to the developer and all the insurance companies and the 23 attorney companies involved, law firms involved, because every single subcontractor, every single vendor had an attorney. And we lost in mediation and arbitration because if they made one mistake in their billing, how can we trust any other of the billings? Millions and millions of dollars were put out by insurance companies to rebuild the building of which we were not the contractors and we were not the architects. But 3 months into this process, one young man whose guilt could no longer be contained came forward and said, my 2 roommates and I burnt the building down. Those 3 young men were roommates of one of our employees. So, we bankrupt the construction company, and we almost had to bankrupt the architectural company because we had tried to save both businesses and do the right thing by paying off these vendors. What do you do when the stuff hits the fan and your dream is crashing? You know that your future is your future, but your dream is crashing. My partner, who was a partner with me in the construction company to build the mixed-use projects, disappeared off the scene. He couldn't be found. Called up his wife many times. I think sometimes she knew where he was, and sometimes I think she really didn't. But he quit showing up, and I was trying to keep what was remaining alive. So I went out and tried to drum up as much work as I could through our church contacts and through other mixed-use contacts, losing a partner who we eventually had to have a vote of the corporation and let him go. And one day, sitting in my office with my hands, with my head in my hands, I had a panic attack. And I never had had a panic attack in my life. I had lost 30 pounds. I was sleeping about 2 hours a night, but usually waking up, just the bed was just totally sweating, and gee, my wife would go, oh my goodness, I got to change the sheets every single day. My sister came to me and said, John, look at you. Are you on cocaine? I said, what do you mean, Mary? Oh, I'm on cocaine. She says, you look like a skeleton. And by the time I had the second panic attack, I sought out a good friend of mine, a friend who didn't know anybody else in my sphere of influence. I didn't even tell my wife that I was having a nervous breakdown because my own pride wouldn't allow me to even tell her that I was not able to function anymore. And so I went to my friend, and he gave me some really good advice. He said, John, go and get a physical. Go get a checkup. I went and got a checkup, and the doctor checked my thyroid levels. He said, have your doctor check your thyroid. They don't check your blood unless they think that there's something going on. So they checked my blood. And the endocrinologist said, John, you have such a large tumor, a goiter totally surrounding your thyroid, that you're at the point now where you can't eat enough calories, you can't eat enough food to replace what your body's burning up. As a matter of fact, you're right now on the verge of your muscles and your organs being deteriorated because of this tumor on your thyroid that's likely been growing slowly, like heating up water slowly over time. It's probably been growing for 10 years, maybe 15 years, slowly. And now, we can't even detect the thyroid. Can't you feel it? And I said, no, I can't feel anything. I feel my Adam's apple. And so he says, you have two choices. Well, you're either going to cut it out or you're going to take radiation. What do you choose? I chose radiation. What I didn't know was that when you just can't take a pill to replace your thyroid, because they bring you up slowly. And so what I wasn't told was I went from hyper energizer bunny that had become me for 10 years or more to crashing and burning. So from sleeping 2 and 3 and 4 hours a night, within 2 weeks, I was sleeping 10 and 12 and 14 hours a night. Everybody back in the business, in the workplace, was saying, John, Energizer Bunny, where are you? The notion was, if you want to get something done, give it to John. He'll figure out a way to get it done. I was toast. I was toast. And what had become me was no longer me. And I went back to the doctor and I said, when am I going to feel like me again? When am I going to be normal again? And he said, John, you're never going to be normal again, because that had become you. You weren't normal to begin with. And Jean said, I've been trying to tell him that for a long time. You aren't normal. It became you. And I not only physically crashed and burned, but my pride, my determination, my story. Have you ever made up a story of the way your life is going to turn out to be and the great stuff you're going to do? My story was toast. My abilities and the totality of me. It wasn't supposed to turn out this way. Go back to entrepreneur. One who organizes, operates, manages networks, required resources with considerable initiative and risk for life. So what's risk? I want to suggest to you that risk, and this is out of Wikipedia, the great Bible that we all use. I want to suggest to you this definition that comes out of Wikipedia. as something that we need to look at. It's the possibility of suffering. In 4 definitions, this is how it starts out for risk. The possibility of suffering. Loss, harm, danger, and ability to accomplish. I would like to suggest to us today that the way to wholeness and balance for anybody who's got an entrepreneur spirit is to go through the adversity and suffering. And if you don't, have you ever known somebody who's an entrepreneur or a leader that doesn't go through the stuff that hits the fan, but becomes more controlling in their nature and in their gift? I've been there, done that. How does that work for me? It didn't work for me very well when the stuff hit the fan. I want to suggest to us that we go through the crap and that we embrace the suffering, because the entrepreneur, like me, has a lot of pride and arrogance. A lot of pride and arrogance. Rick Warren, if you follow him at all, says the greatest ministry and greatest achievements will come from our greatest challenges and brokenness. And yesterday on his Facebook page said, problems or adversity force us to look to God and depend on Him instead of ourselves. Guys, I got to the place where my dreams couldn't be realized, and the gift that God had given me because I had become so much of myself. It became me. And we got to go through the crap to accomplish the gold, and we got to go through the hard times to get to the gold. Why? You know what I found out? I found out that nobody's going to die for my mission statement. But my mission statement, I could die for. But nobody else is going to die for my mission statement, no matter how noble and how good sounding it's going to be. My changed, broken heart and my humbled state was something that really impacted me when I went back and reviewed what had happened. Because when my 17-year-old daughter left home and said, "You will never see me again," and I said, "Jana, why?" She said, "Dad, you're all about image." And I said, no. I'm going to be the best father, the best husband. I'm going to have the best family. I can see it. I'm futuristic. I'm an achiever. It's my future. You see, the culture in which you live in is the reality of the situation. I can have a mission statement providing for facilities and atmosphere for health and healing, but if my employees don't live in that reality, it's not congruent for the sincerity that's in my gut. And the only way I have experienced that I know of to get that congruency is through suffering and going through it. If you have a culture that's not congruent with your dreams, may I suggest that you take another look at dying to your dreams? The story of the difficult times is Jana, after 8 years, came home 3 years ago. And she lives with us still today. And I said, Jana, what happened to you? And she said, Dad, I realized that I became a victim and a phony because of it. And I also realized that I saw hell. And I saw a lot of shit. This is on tape, isn't it? Saw a lot of shit being controlled by a guy that I could not escape. She called us up 3 times and said, send me money, I'm coming home. 3 times we went to the bus station. We went to the airport at the appointed time in the appointed place, and she never showed. And we finally went the 4th time, and an hour and a half later, she showed up. And we took her home, and the first night, Jean was saying goodnight to her in bed, and she came into me and she said, John, we got a problem with Jana, and we were scared to death of Jana coming home. Her sisters were so angry with her that she had destroyed our family. That was the culture they now were living in. And I said, Jean, what's the problem? And she said, Jana's got a loaded gun under her pillow, and she says she can't believe it. I said, Jean, let her have the gun. She's scared of the guy coming to get her. Jana came home, and now she's the biggest champion of our family. She tells everybody about the best family that she grew up in, that she's got the best parents that anybody else could have. She is always getting together all of her sisters. And now the culture of our family has dramatically changed because of the death in Jana. And the death in her. Our family dynamics has totally changed. Jean, who never went back to teaching, who left her teaching certificate at that private school, finds her gift teaching every Sunday at church. But now parents come to her unsolicited to ask her about how to raise kids. Difficult teenage kids. Because of what we experienced. 505 Fifth Avenue South got rebuilt. We weren't the architects. We weren't the builder. But Jack Hoover of C3 got to design his space in the new building on one side of the building. And Debbie Rosenfeld has Snap Fitness and got to design her space and expansion in that building downstairs. And I used to, for years, avoid going down Fifth Avenue South where I live in Edmonds because I couldn't drive by that site because of the pain and the suffering that it brought. And now I go to Snap Fitness and I go to a trainer every week and I go to Jack's place for meetings in his fifth place over and over again. My thyroid it took 2 years for them to regulate my thyroid. And if I'm coming to a presentation at Marketplace Connection, I found a little secret that if I take one extra pill, I can do this. But I'll be toast tonight. Okay? I never used to go to bed at 9 o'clock. Now I go to bed every night at 9 o'clock. I'm toast. The doctor said, John, you are just a little bit older. Okay, in closing, guys. There was a great and is a great leader. My personal Savior named Jesus. Had a band of followers, got the right people on the right seats of the bus, even though they were a pretty motley crew. Okay? whose visions were pretty set. Those guys had to be pretty futuristic entrepreneurs, didn't they? Whose visions were set, but they had to be broken, and the vision had to die, including the vision of the leader, whose adversity and suffering and then ultimate death and resurrection of physical life and vision not only changed history in the world, but changed me. And I believe that the stuff that we go through roots out all of that stuff, that pride and that arrogance, so that the fulfillment of the vision and the fulfillment of the gifts are such that has true effectiveness to be life changers. It couldn't have happened any other way. For me, it'll be different for you. I haven't lost a child to death. Thank goodness Gene and I didn't go through a divorce, because many people who go through that kind of stuff, marriages don't survive. I haven't lost a spouse to death. I haven't had a terminal disease like cancer. The thyroid was fixable through drugs. But my encouragement to us is that we embrace the risk and the adversity, and we go through the suffering so that the work really can be done in us. Thanks, everybody.